Okay, before I even begin discussing the game again, I'm gonna have to actually suggest you watch the first video I released on this game if you haven't already. While I do make some misinformed statements on the game, I also make a lot of statements that I either elaborate on or sort of breeze over in this video, so I've linked the first part in the description and in the funny card I threw in at the top, so pause this video and check that out first. Go ahead, I'll wait. Now, if you're still here at this point and you like what you've seen here, consider hitting the like and subscribe button. Or don't. You do you. I'm not your mom. Let's continue our Vintage story. Last time we spoke about this game, Vintage Story left a very strong initial impression on me. It's an experience I haven't really had in a long time with a game, and it was refreshing to have a game instill strong first-time memories again. And now that I've clocked in an additional, 16 plus hours, I'm happy to report that this opinion has not changed. Vintage Story still remains to be a really strong survival game experience, which honestly I didn't expect. I was expecting that after the honeymoon time period I'd end up feeling like the game's luster was lost on me, yet here I am, more than willing to sing the game's praises once more. Now for this video, I'm going to focus on the new stuff I experienced and things I forgot to mention so we are not retracing old steps, because I hate redoing my work and also I'm kind of a stubborn dick. So let's just kick this thing off with a correction and an explanation. I was informed in my last video that panning was not entirely required to find copper. Surface copper rocks actually indicate that there's a small vein underneath them, so you mark where you find them on your map so you can find that surface vein. And it was for this detail alone that I went ahead and decided to restart my world and make a new one because I kind of forgot where I picked up all those copper rocks. Oops. But thanks to this detail coming to light, at the time of this video, I have made it as far as iron before the first winter, so the commenters that left the information, thank you so much. This does also mean that panning is not the consistent source of early game copper, so disregard my comment on it. I also took this time to go ahead and investigate the advanced world settings, and they are robust, beyond belief, just extra level editing. Ore density, hunger rate, world size, you name it, this system has it. You can literally tamper just about anything, even down to what blocks interact in what ways. For this save, I only messed with ore density because I wanted to keep the overall experience outside of prospecting to be what I believe to be dev intended way to play, so don't expect anything too crazy. Anyways, during my run back, just about every praise I made was further validated. The challenge was still satisfying, the gameplay overall still maintained being the strong point of the game, the music is still something I can study to, still a banger game. That being said, as I approached the mid-section of the game, some issues I had did round the corner. And we'll get back to those later. I want to talk about the new stuff I experienced and how it solidified my final thoughts. Once I got back to copper, I was anticipating that smelting all the other ores would be relatively the same. And it's for that exact reason that if you squint really hard under the definition of dumb and wrong, the literal picosecond I decided to get bronze, I was greeted with a new process to smelt the ore by. For one, there are multiple types of bronze, all with their own metal ratios, and the one I decided to run with was tin bronze. Tin bronze required the titular ore, tin, but also required copper. This would have been easy enough, but the next detail is what adds a bit more complication to it. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, you actually need significantly more copper than tin, and the guidebook explains it to you in percentages instead of direct nugget ratio. Ignoring the fact that it's forcing me to do math again when I'm doing this job to avoid that, there's something to be said about how natural it felt to require one extra step to get the next tier of gear. A lot of games get kind of complacent and say, fuck it, smelt all your metals in the same furnace, and other games get egregious, But in this game, it's a process that requires the player to be just a bit more engaged than dumping a stack in and forgetting about it while not being too overwhelming. It's usually just 1 or 2 new processes, not 40, so it's just pleasant. It feels very natural. And I thought they'd stop at this one instance, but they do it again with iron too. Iron is made by using the Bloomery to smelt nuggets into iron blooms, of which must be forged into bars on a bronze anvil. Note that I said bronze, not copper. This means that there's another natural step required before you're allowed to make the next tier of equipment. Doing this climb didn't give me instant satisfaction, yet when I actually did complete the step to start working on iron bars, the satisfaction I felt was beyond any form I felt in a long time. It felt like more than just sweet gear. It was sweet gear and the pride of a job well done. You worked for that bronze, you forged that anvil, and you took that hammer to the anvil and you made the iron bars to be made into tools. It wasn't an instant transaction, it was a process, an adventure, one that I wish more games adopted. That being said, the Bloomery has a number of issues, but we'll just come right around to that when I'm done gushing about the game. The next thing I want to talk about is just how this game nails the concept of wait time. And now I know that line sounds kinda silly, like who would want any amount of waiting in a survival game, but just hear me out. Just about every process in this game has some degree of wait time involved, and because they all have a wait time, you can actually find yourself in a flow of new things to do with every moment. At the start, you can maybe only do like 1 or 2 things, but as you go on, the list of things you're waiting on will grow, yet you'll rarely ever be sitting and twiddling your thumbs. Like, let's just say hypothetically you're waiting on your iron blooms, right? Well, you can spend that time baking bread, tending to your crops and making sure their nutrients are lined up, which I failed to do, but disregard that. You can go mining for a different resource entirely, maybe even spend some time decorating your house. You have tons of options to just burn the time away while you're waiting on something else. And I know you might be saying that any game allows you to do that, which is partially true, but in this game, this overlap of different processes means that eventually it all lines up as a continuous stream of new tasks for you to do while waiting on something else. The conjunction of all these wait times in a strange way creates a constant flow state where you're always doing something despite you literally waiting on other things. It is genuinely engaging and well structured. Speaking of baking bread though, this game does handle cooking in a fascinating way as well. Early on you just cook meat over a fire, that's pretty much it, but eventually you get a clay oven and a cooking pot, and then you have to actually prep food. Making stuff in a cooking pot requires a bowl, and then to make bread you have to make dough with flour and water, then you have to watch the bread rise so you don't burn it. The coolest part of baking is you get to legitimately see the bread rise. Like, this might be silly, but in my opinion, the tiniest details in a game can sell even the most simple of tasks, like just watching bread being baked. Now, let's say that you don't have an actual real task to be doing, like one for progress, but you really want to decorate the house you've built. Well, hold on to your ass, because this game has one of the single best features I've ever seen in a survival sandbox game, ever. Period. Like, good fucking luck trying to impress me again. You ready? No, you're not. You're not ready. You can chisel blocks and fine edit details into anything you want. Look at this dude, just look! This is the dopest thing I've ever seen. It's down to the literal pixel. I made a bust with how flexible this system is. This is unparalleled level of decoration power in a game. If there's a blockchain that doesn't exist, you can just make it. The power's in your hands. Hell, you can even toggle a config setting to make more than just the default blocks able to be chiseled. This is a cracked system, and I cannot wait to see what people make with it. Now it's at this point that the game might sound perfect given that I haven't complained too much about the game, and to that I say, no, it's definitely got a few things I didn't appreciate personally. First off, I want to get the easy one out of the way first. Even with my additional 16 hours on top of the last time I played, I still stand by prospecting being annoying. Mind you, I don't mean using the prospecting pick when you're underground looking for the ores near you, I mean when you're wandering around the surface scanning for veins. However, now my annoyance has changed. It's not that I can't find the ores, it's that the surface searching is superbly tedious. This is mostly because of all the running without any form of better transportation at the time of this video. I'm fully aware a future update is adding the ability to ride elk, which is sick, and I'm glad we're getting this acknowledged finally, but as this review is coming out before that, I gotta review it as such. Walking around the world for hours searching for a vein is just not my personal idea of fun. It's certainly an interesting take on the tried and true mining formula, but it's really just slow, and I think it adds artificial RNG-induced slog to the game. I did get better at it, and the increased ore density certainly saved a bit of headache, but I still stand by this being rather boring. My next complaint is just how absorbed the game tends to get in realism, almost to a detriment in some cases. For example, making a clay oven in a bloomery, more on the bloomery later, specifically requires fire clay, which is true to real life as other clays can't handle the intense heat. However, the problem becomes a little clearer when you realize that there's a chance that fire clay just ends up being, absurdly uncommon for some reason. That's right, your boy ended up becoming victim of the world gen again. I get that world settings can be tweaked for this, which is true, but I bring this up because I review games based on how a player's first time through would likely end up going. Most players don't tend to mess with the world settings until they've played the default ones because the player wouldn't know of something they'd like to change until they have seen something that isn't to their liking. So when I bring up a world gen based complaint, it isn't for magically making something up, it's to keep the new player in mind. I digress. In my world, for some star-spangled reason, my nearest instance of fire clay was far away from my house, meaning that an entire day had to be dedicated to a trip for clay. I get the fire clay realism, and maybe I'm just used to games having only one kind of clay, but honestly, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't want to have one singular form of clay. Because if you did have one singular form of clay, then my next complaint wouldn't be as annoying as it was. Bloomeries fucking suck. First off, to make a bloomery, you have to cook fire clay bricks in a pit kiln, then craft the clay bricks into both the bloomery and its chimney separately. And once you've done that, it's pretty straightforward. Slap something you want to cook and then some fuel and then light that shitter up. However, once it's done, you have to break the bloomery to harvest your work. Then once you do, it's shattered into bricks in a non-100% return ratio, so you run the risk of losing fire clay bricks. Which means if you don't get enough of your bricks back, you have to go back and get more fire clay specifically, follow the first few steps all over again, and repeat anytime you want glass for any reason, like, I don't know, a greenhouse? I'm just gonna come out and say it, this mechanic feels like ass. It doesn't even make sense because Bloomeries allow you to pull the materials out from underneath in real life. Why am I required to break it? The game doesn't even have an alternative either, like a stone Bloomery or something. It's one Bloomery, no furnace, no nothing. I looked all over the guidebook for it, doesn't exist. If there's a mod that changes this, I'd almost say that shit is required for this. This would have been less annoying for me personally if it didn't require specifically one kind of clay, let alone that clay being thousands of blocks away, but this system would have still sucked. It is frustrating for zero reason and it needs to be changed. Luckily, it wasn't annoying enough to deter me from enjoying the game, but still. And my last complaint, torch holders. It makes your torches permanently lit, which in turn means drifters cannot spawn in the radius of the light around it. Pretty important for something the size of my house. However, the only metal that can make a torch holder is brass. Brass is often used for a decorative metal, so I get why the torch holder is brass. But why only brass? Like, you can definitely make it with other metals. That's not entirely unheard of. Would it be an efficient use of something like, say, iron? No, absolutely not. But it not only gives the player more decorative options, but it gives the player more options to make their home more hospitable should they be unable to find that brass. Plus, brass would still maintain being useful as its purpose is to be made for stuff like that, and the player would likely want to use their other metals for different things than just holding their lights. You could even add like more uses for brass, like instruments if you wanted to, in order to further sell its more decorative and for fun value. But it being the only metal you can use for a torch holder? Nah dog, change that. Now, I know it sounds like I had a lot of beef here, but honestly, you gotta remember that I redacted one of my complaints and then changed up one that already existed. So with only like 3 complaints and 2 total videos of mostly compliments, that's a pretty good ratio. Honestly, Vintage Story is so jam-packed with different features and mechanics that I feel like even after making huge strides, I've still got a sea to explore. In fact, it's for this very reason that I'm just going to wrap up the review here. I could dive into the minutia of soil nutrients, the other drifters, greenhouses, and whatnot, but I think this game is at its strongest when the player is discovering things for the first time. The game's title doesn't lie to you. It is a story. It's your story, your first night, your first drifter encounter, your first copper tools, and your first temporal storm. The game is a journey from start to finish, and it will leave you with memories and stories to share with your friends. Vintage Story has left a sizable impact on me that tells me I'll be playing this game for a very long time. It has easily solidified itself as one of my favorite games of all time, and with the future updates being rolled out, I can tell this game has potential for a bright future. If you didn't buy and play it when I spoke about it last time, I'm telling you once more to go out there and grab this diamond in the rough. It deserves more attention than it gets, and if Minecraft for any reason stops holding my interest, then I know I can always return here to continue my story. Until then, this has been the Bottom Dweller, starting off the new year with a bang.